Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. We're very happy to have renowned cannabis cultivation expert Jorge Cervantes back. Hey, Jorge. Thanks for coming back again. It's good to have you on again so soon. We just spent some time down in South America, so we'll be talking about that. We have lots of hemp news as various states' marijuana initiatives went into effect this week, and a number of other things. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous Dancing Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
First story tonight is from Lansing, Michigan. Key provisions of the state voter-initiated marijuana measure, Proposition 1, the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, will take effect this Thursday, December 6th, or took effect yesterday. Michigan's the 10th state to legalize and regulate the use and sale of marijuana by adults, and it's the 9th to do so via voter initiative. Vermont's the only one that did it through the legislature so far. The legalization of the adult use of marijuana in Michigan represents a victory for common sense public policy while delivering yet another body blow to our decades-long failed prohibition of marijuana. Instead of continuing to arrest over 22,000 Michigan citizens a year for marijuana-related charges, Michigan will now be able to reallocate precious law enforcement resources to combat violent crime while respecting civil liberties and advancing racial justice. This is a great day for the state of Michigan, and as the first Midwest state to legalize marijuana for adult use, a huge step forward in the nationwide fight to end the failed policy of prohibition and incarceration and replace it with a sensible system of legalization and regulation. Provisions specific to the adult possession and cultivation of cannabis took effect at 12 a.m. yesterday. Those over the age of 21 may now legally possess up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana and or 15 grams of cannabis concentrates in a private residence. Adults may also legally cultivate up to 12 marijuana plants in private and possess the harvest of up to 10 ounces of those plants. Both of those are considerably more than are allowed here in my state of Oregon. Public use of cannabis will remain a violation in public under law. The new law, the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, has up to 12 months to begin accepting applications from those seeking to operate licensed cannabis businesses. Despite majority support for the new law, the legislature introduced SB 1243, introduced by outgoing Senate Majority Leader Arian Meekhoff in the lame duck session, and it seeks to significantly amend many of these provisions. The measure would eliminate adults' ability to home cultivate personal use amounts of cannabis, among other changes. Home cultivation is a vital component of Michigan's new law, and this policy is consistent with the policies regulating alcohol, which permit home brewing. 56% of Michigan voters approve Proposition 1. We find it abhorrent that a Republican outgoing lame duck leader would try to stop this popular initiative. Politicians should respect the will of the electorate. They should not be seeking to undermine them. In a similar story out of Salt Lake City, Utah, lawmakers voted in a special legislative session on Monday to replace the state's voter-initiated medical cannabis access program. Republican Governor Gary Herbert of Utah signed the bill, House Bill 3001, into law the same day, last Monday. The new law, the Utah Medical Cannabis Act, takes immediate effect. The former law, Proposition 2, was approved by 53% of Utah voters back on November 6th. Legislators announced in October their intent to rewrite the legislation prior to its passage, after meeting with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who opposed the bill, and other groups, including some of the backers of the original bill. However, other proponents of Proposition 2, including the group Together for Responsible Use and Cannabis Education, or TRUCE, have announced their intent to file a lawsuit in response to the lawmakers' decision to amend the law. The replacement legislation significantly differs from the language that was approved by voters. It eliminates patients' options to home cultivate cannabis. It prohibits the dispensing of either processed flower or edible cannabis products. Oils, capsules, or topicals are permitted. It narrows the list of qualifying conditions, and it significantly reduces the total number of permissible state licensed dispensaries, among other changes. Members of the Utah House voted 60-13 in favor of the new language, even though the voters of the state approved the prior language by 53%. Members of the Senate voted 22-4 in favor of the new language to overturn the voter-initiated law. The bill requires 2/3 support from both chambers in order to become law. The vote to rewrite the voter-initiated law broke down largely along party lines, with Republican lawmakers deciding in favor of the change and Democratic members largely voting against it. An alternative measure backed by members of the Democratic caucus sought to make only minor administrative changes to the initiative, and that proposal was eliminated. In Missouri, today's the first day, or yesterday was, that medical marijuana is technically legal in the state of Missouri. That doesn't mean buds and edibles are on sale for patients who qualify. Not yet. Here's what to expect a month after Amendment 2 got 65.5% of the Missouri vote back on November 6th. The state of Missouri is now mandated to make medical marijuana happen. Under Article 12 of the state constitution, amendments shall take effect 30 days after the election. 2 days after the election, Missouri Governor Mike Parsons said his administration will get to work. Parsons said in an email statement, quote, "The people of Missouri have voted to adopt Constitutional Amendment 2 approving medical marijuana. As governor, it's my job to ensure successful implementation of the people's will. We'll begin a very detailed process of implementing a process that makes medical marijuana available to qualified patients," end quote. I wish the legislators in Michigan and Utah felt as strongly about following the people's will as the governor of Missouri does. Missouri's Amendment 2 will have 192 medical marijuana dispensaries by 2020. Not long afterward, the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, the agency that now is constitutionally required to implement medical marijuana on a strict timeline, posted a timeline that lays out milestones for Amendment 2. The upshot, backers of Amendment 2 say that by 2020 there will be 192 licensed dispensaries spread evenly among Missouri's congressional districts, selling prescription medical marijuana to those with a qualifying health condition. All of the medical marijuana proposal approved in Missouri says that DHSS will begin accepting pre-filed applications, and the patient fee is $25 a year. Cultivation fees for selling to the dispensaries are $10,000 a year. Infused product fees are $6,000, and dispensary fees are $6,000. Just to the northwest of Missouri, Iowa's first medical cannabis dispensary, MedFarm, opened on Saturday, and Alzheimer's disease was added to Minnesota's list of medical marijuana qualifying conditions by the state's Department of Health. In New York, members of the New York State Assembly held a public hearing on adult use marijuana legalization on Long Island. Governor Cuomo of New York says he will pass those bills this year to legally regulate cannabis sales. From Illinois, House Bill 2367 seeks to vacate criminal records among those with past marijuana possession convictions. On the 29th of November, the Illinois House of Representatives voted 67-37 to pass House Bill 2367. The measure now awaits action in the Senate in Illinois. The bill amends the Cannabis Control Act so that Illinoisans may file a petition with the court requesting expungement for any past marijuana violation that's no longer defined as a crime under state law. Several other states, including Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Oregon, have enacted similar laws. Out of Washington, D.C., House and Senate lawmakers have agreed in principle to reconcile versions of H.R. 2, the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, also known as the 2018 Farm Bill, which includes provisions lifting the federal prohibition of industrial hemp. The hemp-specific provisions, which Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell included in the Senate version of the bill, but were absent from the House version, amend federal regulations to further expand and facilitate state-licensed hemp production, research, and commerce. The language also, for the first time, amends the Federal Controlled Substances Act of 1970 so that industrial hemp plants containing no more than 0.3% of THC are no longer classified as Schedule I controlled substance. Certain cannabinoid compounds extracted from the hemp plant would also be exempted from the Controlled Substances Act. House and Senate lawmakers still need to vote on the engrossed version of the act, which they're expected to do next month or later this month. Passage of the bill would allow state governments rather than the federal governments to be the primary regulators of hemp and hempen products. Senate Majority Leader McConnell previously shepherded hemp-related language in the 2014 version of the Farm Bill, permitting states to establish hemp research and cultivation programs absent federal approval. A majority of states have now enacted legislation to permit such a program. Out of Washington, D.C., a growing number of banks and credit unions are providing financial services to marijuana-related businesses, according to data released by the U.S. Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The report acknowledged that the number of financial institutions actively banking with marijuana-related businesses rose from 401 in October of 2017 to 486 in September of 2018. Although the federal classification of cannabis as a Schedule I prohibited substance discourages banks from cooperating with state-licensed cannabis businesses, a 2014 U.S. Treasury Department memo provided guidance to financial institutions wishing to transact with the marijuana industry. However, that memo was rescinded by the Justice Department earlier this year. The big financial news this week in the world of marijuana is that Altria, the major tobacco company behind Marlboro and Philip Morris, says that they finally made a move announcing today that it was investing $1.8 billion in the marijuana stock, the Cronos Group. The investment by Altria, maker of top cigarette brands including Marlboro, gives its exposure to the global market that could be worth $200 billion in 15 years. And it provides the Cronos Group, a Canadian company, with cash and regulatory experience to capitalize on the marijuana legalization movement worldwide. Altria's investment isn't as large as the investment made by wine and spirits company Constellation Brands in canopy growth last year, but it's the second largest investment by a U.S. company in a Canadian marijuana company. At a price of $16.25 Canadian per share, or about $12.12 U.S., Altria's U.S. $1.8 billion investment nets it a 45% equity stake in Cronos. Altria will nominate 4 directors to Cronos Group's board, one of whom will be independent, and it's receiving a warrant allowing it to boost its ownership by an additional 10% within 4 years. The deal is particularly significant because it injects confidence into the fledgling marijuana industry at a time when it's needed. Marijuana stocks, including Cronos, rallied sharply higher ahead of the opening of Canada's recreational marijuana market in October, but they've been declining ever since on reports of supply shortages, uncertainty over when Health Canada will expand the products allowed in its recreational market to include high-margin vapes, edibles, and beverages, and concerns over valuation. Why Altria is investing in marijuana while it remains a Schedule I drug in the United States, so it's prohibited federally, but 33 states have legalized marijuana use in one form or another, including 10 that created recreational marijuana marketplaces. The momentum toward legalization is likely to continue given that 66% of Americans, including over 50% of conservative Republican voters, favor it, according to a Gallup poll. Washington could still crack down on marijuana companies operating in states where it's legal, but evidence suggests that the likelihood of that is declining. For example, Congress recently included laws in its latest farm bill allowing farmers to grow more hemp. The $50 billion U.S. market remains fragmented until marijuana prohibition ends federally, but it's a different story in Canada. That country's medical marijuana market's been flourishing since changes created a regulated licensing and retailing pathway in 2014, and medical marijuana sales there total in the hundreds of millions of dollars annually. On October 17th, the country's recreational marketplace opened for business nationwide, and although estimates vary, Deloitte, an accounting firm, thinks recreational marijuana sales there could eclipse 4 billion Canadian dollars next year. We should note that the whole nation of Canada is slightly smaller than California. There are 41 million people in California and only 39 million in Canada. Marijuana headwinds are also easing in other markets, including Australia and Europe, and that has industry watchers thinking that legal marijuana markets could be as big as alcohol or tobacco someday. For instance, Constellation Brands estimate legal marijuana sales worldwide could exceed $200 billion. Cronos trails its competitors in sales and production, but it's growing rapidly. In the third quarter, it increased sales 186%, and it sold 514 kilograms of marijuana, up 213% from the year before. So that is moving forward. From Philadelphia, marijuana use by young people is not predictive of later conduct problems such as school truancy or theft, according to data published in the journal Addiction. A team of investigators from the United States and the Netherlands assessed the long-term association between self-reported marijuana use and conduct problems in a cohort of 364 racially and socioeconomically diverse youth. They reported, quote, change in cannabis use did not predict changes in conduct problems or peer cannabis use over time, end quote. Rather, they acknowledged, quote, increases in conduct problems predicted increases in cannabis use. The authors concluded, quote, conduct programs predict cannabis use but not vice versa, particularly during mid-late adolescence. If youth want to use unprescribed cannabis to cope with their condition, then healthier alternative coping strategies and support should be made available, end quote. This study, disentangling longitudinal relationship between youth cannabis use, peer cannabis use, and conduct problems, developmental cascading links to cannabis use disorder, appears in this month's edition of Addiction. And that's the end of our hemp news segment for tonight. We have a song here from John Trudell about industrial hemp from back in 2013 at our Hemp Stock Festival. We'll be right back with Jorge Cervantes right after this.
Seed, life, seeding life, and the earth is our mother, and the land is her flesh, and the water is her milk, and the oil is her blood, and we are her children. In this land we come from, of this earth we're made of, with us as future ancestors, given responsibilities to live. We are the future we bring. If we don't take care of the land, how can the land take care of us? Same with sky and air we breathe. Today is time to remember tomorrow and the reality of we reap what we sow. The reality of land and life is in the seed. Seed has memory, memory of life. Wild seed memory, keeping alive, up close, face to face with the destroyers and their synthetic seed without memory. Toxic planting poison in earth and minds, disregarding well-being for maximizing profits, abandoning the children to massive debt, making the price of freedom unaffordable at the expense of the many for the benefit of the few. Like a spreading mad human disease, chaosing minds with liars' promises, seeding old fears with new fears, life in the world of the money man. It's time to think our way out of what we believed our way into. How can we show respect to life if we don't use our common sense? Wild seed, life seeding life, and the earth is our mother, and the land is her flesh, and the water is her milk, and the oil is her blood. We are her children.
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul.
Viewers. So we just had a little trip down to Expo Mediweed in Colombia, down in South America. This is our second year in a row to be down there together, and so it was fun. I know you were busy this time.
It was, yeah, I was real busy. One of the things about me, I talk Spanish, quite fluent Spanish. So
yeah, you've been living in Barcelona for a while.
So a long time, 20 years.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy for me. And the thing is that really got me about this fair is there was 9,000 people this year. And the year before, 2017, there were 3,000.
That's in
so it's
three
just,
times.
It's gone through the roof, you know. Colombia's a much different country than it used to be. Everybody thinks about Pablo Escobar and the cocaine trade.
And the violence associated with
And the violence. Well, I'll tell you, I did cruise around a lot in a bulletproof car.
Okay.
I went a lot of places. I went to, I've got a whole list. A lot of the times you fly in the airplane there because the roads go, they're so
there are
wide.
no highways.
No, it takes forever to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And
I noticed 120 miles from Bogota to Medellin was
9 hours.
Yeah, 9-hour drive.
9
but
hours,
as the crow flies, it was just 120 miles.
Yeah, and the traffic's real heavy. You've got 2-lane roads. A lot of the roads you cannot widen because it's on indigenous land. There's a lot of legal concerns there that you don't really realize. But yeah, I went to, Cali, which is over in the west, Bogota, which is up high, that's 9,000 feet. Cali is about 2,000 feet. Popayan, I went there. Had to actually going there from Bogota. You had to, and that's south of Cali. We were taking the airplane there. It was raining so hard that the airplane couldn't land. We had to turn around and go the next day.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was going really. It was pretty amazing. Beautiful, beautiful provincial town. Actually, Popayan got its charter for the city the year before Bogota did.
Ah, I see.
That was it's at a crossroads there where the Spanish were hauling out all the gold from Colombia. 'Cause, you know, half the flag is gold.
Yeah.
And the top half, and that's because it's full of gold everywhere. It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing
I
place.
went through the Bogota Gold Museum. They had
Mhm.
lots of things that were 1,500, 2,500 years old.
Yeah, yeah, it's really pretty amazing place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then where else? Rolanillo, that's over where it used to be a big mafia area. It still is. This year, actually, it's the biggest coca crop ever.
Oh, wow.
There's never been any bigger. I don't know. I don't agree with any of that stuff. They say that they're trying to spray it and everything. It's all politically motivated.
Right.
Best not to get into that. But I was there. Went to a couple of places. I went to a big farm at Farmacielo. And
I heard a lot about them in Medellin
yeah,
at the expo.
They got one of the first licenses. There's a little bit.
So they're an
discrepancy there.
extractor.
Yeah, they have extraction there. They have, I think they do CO2 there. But they've got some very big farms. They're over in Rio Negro. And Rio Negro is about an hour outside of Medellin. The elevation's about 5,000 feet, 4,500 feet, and that's where all the chrysanthemum flowers have been growing for years and years.
A lot of roses come from there, too.
The roses.
Throughout.
Roses, too, but it's funny, the chrysanthemum started first.
Ah.
That was the big one. Interestingly enough, they used to call it the death flower because that was the only flower you could get to bloom all year round because it's photoperiodic reactive, meaning it needs 12 hours of darkness to flower. So since it needs 12 hours of darkness, it's in the perfect place.
And it's always 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness there on the equator.
Exactly, exactly. And you're about 5 degrees north of the equator there. So cannabis and chrysanthemums have the exact same, or not pretty much the same needs for life, you know? And so you just take one crop out and put the other one in, and it's a fit.
So they just switch.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Except one of them is much more profitable to grow than the other. And the good thing is about over in Rio Negro, that area
I take it it's not the chrysanthemums that are the more profitable.
No, no.
Right.
No, it isn't. Everybody's looking at the new crop now. The good thing is about Rio Negro is it's right next to the airport, and it's also next to the Army base. So there's no problems with security. That keeps coming up in Colombia. There's about 2 million, I think about 2 million refugees that came out of Venezuela right now because of the political problems going on with Maduro, the president, and the hyperinflation and stuff. So there's a lot of pressure put on, and that adds to violence, basically. So you got to be careful. There's still things happening there. I learned a lot about bulletproof cars. Yeah, there's different levels of them.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. The one I was in could take 9mm machine guns.
Oh.
Okay, and it couldn't take a 50mm, and it couldn't take a rocket.
Those are pretty hefty. That's like
two levels
an
higher.
Army level.
Yeah, so I didn't have the importance of a real important guy. It could take
Probably,
rockets.
but you weren't attacked, so it was okay.
No. We didn't really think of it. Actually, the bulletproof cars are pretty much left over from the wartime, they call it. Yeah, so, but it was interesting. And then I also went and hung out at, excuse me, Mandara Pharma, which is another company. They have one of the first licenses as well. And
so they just started issuing these licenses about a year ago, right? So
no, a couple of years ago, actually. Well, it built up, and nobody planted until I think it was last December, because they didn't have all of their licenses. There's several types of licenses. There's a high THC license, drug license, and then a
you've told them never to call you here, I know.
yeah, well, I forgot to turn my phone on.
That's
I have
okay.
to apologize.
No problem.
Yeah, and anyway, they, I'll just leave it. They have another license, which is a low THC license, and that's less than 1%. And there, it's off. Okay, and it's less than 1%. There's 160 THC licenses and 140 low THC licenses for hemp and CBD.
Across the whole country.
Across the whole country. And then there's
and then Colombia has been allocated 40% of the international
44% of the international production of cannabis
by the United Nations Narcotics Control Board, which governs international cannabis sold.
I mean, that's really a flip out for me, because it's a nation of 45 million people. There's more than 200 countries in the world, and they have 44% of the production capability, or they can fill that.
The Canadian buyers are all over that, trying to ship Colombian cannabis to Canada.
The thing is, nobody's been issued an export license yet. Mm-hmm. And I talked to several people. I met with a couple of senators, actually.
Colombian senators.
Colombian senators, yeah. Senator Galan and Velasco. And Galan was the one that introduced the medical bill. I mean, the medical cannabis bill. And it was really interesting, because they know the nuts and bolts of how everything works, and now they're working on getting export licenses. Export licenses are, well, they can't get it out of the country, so they're going to build a local drug market, or local sales in Colombia and then South America, and but they still can't export, and they have to get orders, and there's a lot of interaction they have to do with other countries, and really nobody knows what they're doing, because it's never been done before. So there's a lot of mistakes and a lot of misconceptions that are happening, and they're moving forward. But they're harvesting crops. Farmacielo I believe they're going to be ready to harvest in not that long, and other places are too. So
I know you gave a talk in Medellin, and we were talking before you gave it. Of course, your room was packed. You know, it was packed all the way outside. You couldn't move in, and then I can't speak Spanish anyway, and you're fluent, so you were giving your talk in Spanish. You want to tell our audience what you talked about? I know you thought about it considerably.
I talked about, there's a couple of things. Moving from a small grow, from a backyard, growing 20 plants, because it's legal to grow 20 plants in Colombia. It has been for several years now. But a lot of people aren't growing there because they don't have a culture of cannabis. They just started the magazine, Cáñamo magazine, last year. I think they have 8 issues, 6 or 8 issues now, hardly any.
Is that the same company that's out of Spain that Moses works on, and they do them?
That's in my town in Barcelona.
In Mexico?
It started there. There's Cáñamo. First it was Cáñamo Mexico, and they have the trade fair going on this weekend, actually, in Mexico City. With my friend Julio Zunil. And Julio, I have to apologize for not coming. I mean, he wanted me to come.
He asked me about 2 weeks ago. I said, I can't come in 2 weeks,
He asked me a long time ago, and I just can't. I gotta show up there sometime, because he's done a lot of really good things. You came
in by video on the first year, or was it the second? First or second year?
First or second year, I can't remember. But
on the Expo weed.
Right. Yeah, that was a good thing. But this year it's going to be really big, because cannabis is legal in Mexico. They've legalized it. They just haven't made the rules. You know, they haven't decided how legal it will be, set limits and stuff. So
there's a lot of exciting things happening in Mexico.
Mexico is unbelievable. It really is.
How the legislature has to change the laws because of the Supreme Court.
There too. I talked to my good friend down there, Christian Roman. And in fact, I was.
And you went to school in Mexico when you were younger, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to university in
an
Puebla.
exchange program.
Puebla. No, it was University of Americas in Puebla. Puebla State, and it's between. It's a private university outside of the city of Puebla, the third largest. Yeah, third largest is Mexico City, Guadalajara, and then Puebla. Third largest city there. And anyway, Colombia, my talk was about scaling up and how much more difficult it is. Because when you scale up a garden, there's a lot of other concerns that you have. One of them is drying, because see, you're there in the tropics and you've got a whole crop that comes in, and you've got a humidity there. It's about 80% most of the time, depends on where you're at. And
Sometimes higher.
Yes. And then you've got rainy season. They budget for 3 crops. You can do 4, possibly 5 crops, depending on how quick you can get the crops out of the field and then back in. So you're going to be harvesting during the rainy season, and that can be a real problem. And all those details aren't worked out yet. They're just not. They don't have really good varieties for the tropics. Mold is a big problem, specifically botrytis cinerea, and which is a specific mold, and then powdery mildew, which is in Spanish oidio. It's kind of a catch-all term for several families of mold, but it usually it's that light flaky mold that you see on top, or light powdery mold that you see on top of plants, and it can attack all kinds of things.
You know what? We have the video that you provided us here from Toribio, which is in the Cauca province.
Yeah.
And so this is not a big. Well, it's. You want us to run that now?
Okay. Yeah. I can bring that up real quick. Yeah. Paul called me just
An hour ago.
an hour beforehand, and asked me for a video on it. So I had to post one that was already there. I didn't have time to upload anything. So I just did the convenient one that was right at 5 minutes long, because that's what you asked for. So I have to apologize. It starts out in Spanish, and I don't introduce it because it's the second video in a series. And so about the first 30 seconds, maybe a minute, is in Spanish. I got to apologize for that. And then it goes back and forth. But it's really quite interesting, because you can see they have to put lights over the plants to give it a little bit of light at night, so the plants will stay in the vegetative growth stage, because they need 18 hours. Well, you've got to interrupt the nighttime so it'll stay in the vegetative growth stage.
Yeah, with the 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime that they have year round there, they just automatically will flower.
They'll flower when they're about 2 feet tall, or 2 months old.
Which will give you maybe 2 or 3 ounces per plant.
If that.
Yeah.
If that. A much less, much lower harvest.
So if you let it vegetate, you can get kilos per plant.
You can get, well, it depends. These plants are looking at about 200 grams to 300
These are
grams.
smaller ones in this garden, but I've seen bigger ones in some other gardens.
Yeah, these plants are about 4 feet tall. Everybody measures in meters, so I remember meters so much for these. But it's about 1 meter, 40 inches to 1 meter 20, which would be about 5 feet.
Okay, well, we're going to run the video, and we'll be right back and talk about it and have some other videos, so stay tuned.
Vale más, ¿ah? Muy impresionante. Wow. Sí, los plátanos grandotes.
Hay sabuco.
Wow. Y fíjate que... ¿Y cuántas plantitas están aquí más o menos?
De plátano, café o marihuana.
No, de marihuana.
Aquí hay 1000 planticas en este cuadrito.
Wow.
Y aquí en la casa para arriba.
Oh, wow. Another 1,000 plants.
¿No le apagó la luz todavía? Ya se quitó. No, todavía no se la ha quitado porque pues estoy esperando que crezca otro porque esto ya fue la otra semana.
Wow. No, ¿cuántas plantas?
1000 plantas.
Sí. No, estoy repitiendo. Me voy a subir ahí pues, y seguir con el inglés un poco, ¿no?
Eso, sí.
Wow. I'll just go up here and talk English a little bit, and we'll take a look at this 1,000 plant garden, just up behind the house. This thing's huge. I can't believe this. It's amazing. And here you can see everybody's down there. They're getting small. We'll just go up a little higher, see how things go. But this is really Well, he said 1,000 plants, and I've been climbing straight up ever since I got here. Look, here we go. We got a row of beans, coffee, coca plants, cannabis plants, and other rows. Beans here, coffee. Unbelievable. A little coca plant. But there's more cannabis than anything. Look, this just keeps going. Man, I can't believe it. I'm just gonna keep going with it. See how high this goes. I can't believe this. He said 1,000 plants, and I'm almost to the top of the little backyard garden. But this is a hike. Okay. Right here. That's the end of the garden. Right where the banana plantation starts. I'll turn around here. Well, look. Heck of a view from up here. This is pretty amazing. Okay. Take a look down here. Plants everywhere. Oh, look at that coffee plant. It's just full of seeds, full of beans. Amazing. All of this is in the marijuana garden behind the house. 1,000 plants. Now let's take a look down here. Kind of got to get out in the open. Okay, now we can see down in the valley a little bit. Off to the right's the bare spot over there is the soccer field. And then right here, I mean, this is pretty amazing. I don't know if you can see everybody down there, but they're down at right down there, you can see them. So I climbed up that small area. It's like straight up. Or sure felt like it. But this is the little backyard marijuana garden of 1,000 plants. Front yard only has 900 plants. I think we can see around here. The light bulbs are to keep the plants from flowering. And they have to use those here in the tropics. But this is one hell of a big garden. Nice valley, killer view everywhere. Beautiful. Okay, well, this is Jorge Cervantes in my new buddy's, Colombian buddy's backyard garden here in Cauca, Toribio, Cauca, Colombia.
48. All right. Okay. Welcome back. You want to tell people about that?
Yeah, that was real interesting. The family there was quite poor. Quite a few kids. They had like six children there, a husband and wife. Extended family was living there. Mother and father. The extended family, the grandparents as well. And those were their crops. They grow in order of importance. Excuse me. They grow coca, the little yellow plants there, and that's they chew the leaves on those. I don't know if these guys do. I didn't see them chewing any leaves, but they chew the leaves and it releases an alkaloid, and it's a mild stimulant, or a bit stronger than coffee, and that's the plant they later turn into pasta or bazuco, they call it there, and then later refine it into cocaine. And then the next most important plant is cannabis, and there's a good market for that there. But at the time, last year, the market for cannabis that they were selling, they were selling it, and this is all on Indian land, NASA Indian land, or NASA they call it, which is a conglomeration of different tribes. So it'd be like a reservation here.
They were selling the cannabis for $7.50 a pound. It's funny, they use a metric system on one side, and then to tell the weights of cannabis, it's by the pound. So you can guess where that probably goes.
Yeah, it's going to a market that measures pounds.
Pounds, yes. But a good deal of it apparently now finally is going to Brazil, which is a good thing. And because they always get the bad
Paraguayan.
Yeah, the Paraguayo, which is really bad. And then the next most important plant is coffee, and it's a great coffee region, great coffee growing region. I love the coffee. I drank a lot of it. And the last important plant is bananas. And bananas, I think, are it used to be anyway, it probably still is the biggest commercial crop in the world. So the price is, not that great. But that's how they survive.
I
and it's
saw the
all
biggest
subsistence.
avocados, about the size of cantaloupes. I was amazed how big the avocados are.
Yeah,
there.
they've got some really big ones. It depends on where you're at. Boy, I don't remember the name of the variety, but they've also got a very big seed, and the flesh is a little bit weak. It's a little bit spongy. It's not very good. But it was quite an interesting garden. You really couldn't tell just how steep it was, but the mount was about like that, and it wasn't that high there. I was a little bit out of breath because I climbed up so fast. But
And you were already at about 5,000 feet.
No,
elevation.
that was about 2,000 feet.
Oh, okay.
There. That was over at Torrevillo.
Okay.
In Valle de Cauca, and that was it was a real hot area with the FARC, a real hot the revolutionary group that President Santos got the Nobel Peace Prize.
And that was
for.
just 2 years ago at
Yes.
this point.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago. He got the Peace Prize for stopping the 40-year-old war, 45, 50-year-old war.
Yeah.
And I sure hope that things will work out because the new president is.
He's not in favor of that peace treaty.
No, he's not in favor of the peace treaty, and he's not living up to the terms of it.
Mhm.
And a lot of the people from FARC have left. So I'm a bit concerned, especially about that area.
The cow.
I don't want to go back there because you can
Dangerous.
get killed. You
Yeah.
can get killed, straight up.
2 years ago it was safe. Now, not
A
safe.
year ago it was safe. 2 years ago it was not, because that was right afterwards.
I
and
toured it 2 years ago. It seemed safe
it-
to me. No
it-
one
it
shot me,
wasn't.
fortunately.
It wasn't safe.
Yeah.
It wasn't safe. It just started. They didn't want to start something again, but that was not a great time to go.
Mhm, mhm. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. If someone wants to go to your website, where should they go?
They go to marijuana with a J, marijuanagrowing.com, and you can find me there. I'll answer questions there and stuff. I haven't been answering as many lately because I'm just busy all the time. I'm going to be doing projects in Colombia and also Mexico. I'll be giving a 2-day seminar in Mexico next year. We're setting that up right now.
Mhm.
Working with the president, ex-president
Vicente
Vicente
Fox.
Fox.
That's exciting.
Doing that. Yeah, it is, because he really is in favor of legalizing. Well, he was in favor of legalizing cannabis. Now cannabis is legal in Mexico. They can export it as well,
Mhm.
and they're just working out the details.
Mhm.
There's a million things going to be
When
happening
is this
soon.
conference going to be with Fox?
It's not set. It's going to, for sure, it's not set in stone. It's April or May next year.
I see.
And there's going to be, it's going to be quite large, I think. And I'll be doing a seminar the week beforehand
Mhm,
and teaching people to grow. One of the things, if anybody has seeds or knows of any varieties that are good, they also call them strains, it's a misnomer, but if they have any varieties that will do well in the tropics, please let us know, because those varieties are super important The biggest problem they have with the tropical varieties is, well, the daylight period. They bloom too fast, so if you want something that blooms a bit slower, and then also high CBD varieties are really necessary now, but things that are resistant to mold, specifically botrytis and powdery mildew, those kinds of things are super important.
We have another video. It's about growing giants. It's about 3 minutes long. We got about 7 minutes, so we'll be back with about 3.5, 4 minutes.
Okay.
So we'll run this video and be right back.
Look at this beautiful, great big garden right here. But in order to harvest a garden like this, you've got to have security. You've got to have a place to grow it. You've got to have a place to keep it away from animals and little pests and stuff, and keep it away from thieves and everybody. So in this garden, the road is a real long old gravel road, and it's all broken up. Washboard is terrible, difficult to get down. And there's 3 or 4 lock gates. I think there might even be 4 lock gates. Yeah, 4 lock gates on the way up here. And there's a whole bunch of dogs down there. And you know, they like each other, they like a few of us, but they don't like outsiders. So you got to get by them. Okay, then you get all the way up here, you got to go by a couple of houses and everything. And then finally, you come out to this little grove that's just been cleaned out. And you've got a beautiful windbreak, the trees all the way around, and it's really protected in here. So those are the kinds of things you look for. Another thing I'd like to talk about, when you site your garden and this security stuff, there's several things you also need for your plants. And number one is sunlight. And that's got to be everywhere. This patch gets sun all day long. The sun goes right overhead, gets almost 12 hours of sun. That's beautiful. Okay, from morning to night. Now, it's on a bit of a hillside, so it gets everything. They really sited the patch properly. And then another thing you really need to look for is water, because each one of these plants, they don't get this big easily. It takes them water to grow this big. This thing is huge because it consumes 50 to 100 gallons of water a day. That's a hell of a lot of water. And it gets hotter than, oh, we call it hotter than a popcorn fart. I mean, it gets really hot out here. It gets to be like, 100, 110 degrees out here. And that means the chemistry of these leaves, if it's 100 degrees out there, it's 110, 115 inside this leaf. That means everything quits growing. So they're going to use a lot of water just to try to stay cool. And that's real important. So you need a good water source, hundreds of gallons. If you have to take it out of a public stream, you could be looking at trouble, because that's public water and it's a public asset. So you're going to need to find a well or somewhere where you can, get water, city water. Otherwise, you're going to have to haul it. And I don't know about you, but water weighs 8 pounds for 1 gallon. 1 gallon, 8 pounds. Okay, 10 gallons of water, 80 pounds. Okay, 50 gallons of water, 400 pounds. That's a hell of a lot of weight. So it's best to use a pump or, some other way to carry it than, Armstrong. Because Armstrong gets tired after the first couple hundred gallons. And we got a lot of gallons to put here. So let's go see a few more things, see how we can use our water to the best of our ability.
Well,
Here we
that
are.
was from a few years back in
5 or 6 years ago, that's
Yeah.
when they had plant limits.
Uh-huh.
And so everybody was growing the biggest plants they could. And trust me, they were growing 10 pounders, 10 pounds of dried buds. And now they're still growing them. But growing plants that big is a big problem, because the longer the plant's in the ground, the more things that can happen to it. The more time it has for the fungus to take over, the more time it has for insects to set up shop and set up a whole ecosystem there.
Yeah, it used to be we were limited in the number of plants we could grow. And so in
Yes.
that environment, it made sense to grow big plants. But now it's more according to the square foot of the canopy, which takes away the incentive to grow the
Big
super
plants.
big plants.
Well, yeah, and honestly, the thing is, you can grow several plants or several crops a year if you have the warm enough weather, right? And it makes most sense for me to grow a plant that's about 5 to 6 feet tall, no taller, because once it gets bigger than that, it's too hard to handle. The branches get too heavy, the buds get too heavy, the branches break. They're just too much to deal with.
Had to deal with that a lot.
And I think we're going to see a lot more plants that grow shorter, probably 4 to 5 feet. Like, okay, a good example are sunflowers, for example. Remember, you can grow those great big 8, 9, 10-foot sunflowers at home with the big heads on them. They look great. Well, commercially, they grow small sunflowers about 4 to 5 feet tall with a head on it about like that, full of seeds. And it's just a lot easier to handle, because what they're moving to now are plants that you can handle with a machine. So you won't be able to, well, you won't have to do everything by hand, right? And I was just talking to my good friend Jerry Norton, who's ahead of
Hemp grower here in Oregon.
Growers Association here in Oregon, and man, he's got things sorted out. This year, what they're doing, this year what they did, we're
down to about 90 seconds.
Okay, they have plants that are about 5 feet tall. They cut them off. They make them into a great big bale that weighs 3,000 pounds. They compress that bale really tight, and what happens? The nitrogen in there fixes everything so it kills all the mold and it's preserved. So they can pull that out 6 months later and process it.
I see.
That kind of stuff is happening now. We didn't think about it before, but the farmers are involved, and I love these guys.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on. We're down to less than a minute left. Your website is marijuanagrowing.com. Do you want to say
That's
anything
correct.
in closing for you?
Yeah, let's see, marijuanagrowing.com. Buy all my books. I've got the Cannabis Encyclopedia. It's an excellent book. It's my best work yet. You can find that on Amazon.com. My other books, Marijuana Horticulture, that's already published in
I've been
eight
pushing that
languages.
book on this show for more than 20 years.
It's in 8 languages now.
I know.
It's great.
Russian.
Yeah, Russian. It's in Russian.
Well, we're out. I want to thank
Italian.
you again. We got about
Okay.
20 seconds left. Thank you guys for watching. Tune in next week and help us restore hemp. Good night.